NPR, PBS are on the chopping block very soon, and I'll toss this question to both of you. This looks like it could be actually like the end of PBS and NPR's government funding. Charlie, you will remember that Mitt Romney had a whole spat with Barack Obama over Big Bird back in the 2012 election, and that became an issue. I'm looking at a headline right.
And look where Elmo's gone. Maybe
Elmo's off the rails. See, this is why we need to cut government funding to get rid of the Elmo anti-Semitism.
That's right.
If you're not online, God bless you, but you've missed 24 hours of memes in which Elmo is cast as a rank anti-Semite. So that's where Charlie was going with this. But I'm reading a headline now in the Raleigh News and Observer that just says, Big Bird and Friends' final reckoning. Senate to vote on funding cuts to NPR and PBS. And I know both of you have followed their responses. I listen to NPR a lot because I drive, and it's sort of like sometimes it's too much of a hassle to hook your phone up to the car. I have an old car and turn on a podcast, so I sometimes just default. And they have just doubled down on being exactly why Republicans want to get rid of their funding. So, Gabe, you actually are an intrepid reporter on the question of where government funding goes to and how government money is spent. And I want to ask you, I'll start with this. As Senate Republicans right now, this week, are mulling final cuts to NPR, PBS, who will survive without their government funding. They will be different. But how do you think this ends for NPR and PBS? Could it have gone differently over the last couple of months?
I don't know how it's going to end. I mean, I guess Charlie might be good to speak, how it might end or otherwise logistically, but I think there's a specific two lenses I guess I'm looking at it through. It's one, it's the whole situation's indicative of, I think, the Trump administration's just like thirst for and Trump's thirst for political retribution against people he views as, the left. And then two, I mean, I guess, the open question is like the Trump administration and Trump in getting into office made a very big stink about the issue of free speech. And I think generally right now, and I think with CBS, with this funding, it raises the question of how the administration in alignment with this and otherwise with the State Department's doing with revoking student visas, deportations, how they're handling the speech issue. And I think the one side of the picture, we would say that these are government funded outlets, and it raises the whole question of why should the government subsidize them? And then the other side of the picture is really goes to the issue of these are long time subsidized by the government. Certainly they have, in different ways become partisan tools, Republicans would argue, but is it antithetical, I guess, to speech and what they've run on and targeting these, outlets? I don't know what you think, Charlie. But.
Well, yeah, I'm actually curious what Charlie thinks, because this is, a rural issue that Democrats have tried to highlight this as a rural issue, and to some extent it is a rural issue. That's a reality, but the people in rural areas are not a monolith and would react in different ways to whether or not the government should pull the plug. And let me put this Trump Truth Social back up on the screen. He said, "It is very important," this was a few days ago, "that all Republicans adhere to my rescissions bill, and in particular defund the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, PBS and NPR, which is worse than CNN and MSDNC put together. Any Republican that votes to allow this monstrosity to continue broadcasting will not have my support or endorsement." And then he sent it off with his signature. Thank you for your attention to this matter, as though we had any choice but to give our attention to this matter. So Charlie, as the left sort of predicts a political catastrophe for Republicans with this, how do you think, if the Senate responds as they have to by Thursday, this is like literally on the chopping block right now as we're talking, how do you think that actually goes for Republicans?
Yeah, you've been in the business as long as I have, watching these repeated promises by Republicans to cut NPR funding. And I think that they basically have to show up and vote appropriately if they expect this to happen. Whether or not it actually passes is an open question. It's so hard to cut anything in Washington. As we saw with the massive bill that was passed lots of spending in that bill, even though there were some cuts. But yeah, I really think that the Senate, Senate Republicans basically have to put up where they've been talking about this for decades. So there's that. And then whether or not it actually passes is an entirely different question. But ultimately, I think that this is fading as an issue. You would typically have both parties suggesting that, some in both parties suggesting that this is important for, rural radio stations, but we're in an entirely new media environment. We have podcasts, we have other ways of entertainment and information. And so it's not quite as essential as it was when radio was sometimes the only way that people could get news and information. So less of an issue on that aspect. But ultimately, and then this is where I always come down on this issue, is that there are enough philanthropists, there are enough wealthy people, wealthy Democrats, if they want to continue to see NPR and PBS go forward. I think that they'll have a rally, they'll circle the wagons and protect public broadcasting, even though if Trump manages to cut it for 3 years. And then, depending on who gets the next office, I'm sure there'll be some way that they can squeeze out funding from some other channel, because government's really good at doing that.
Right.
Now, you go ahead, Gabe.
No, I think that's right. And I think it's like the question is, one, is it long lasting? And it reminds me of in this same rescissions bill, there's a whole lot of Doge cuts, billions of dollars that Elon Musk and his team claim to have cut from the federal government. A lot of the savings in their website's been inflated and not represented the actual cuts. But even if Congress and the president vote to rescind some of these cuts, the next administration, can come right in and greenlit the same sort of funding, and they can greenlit the same sort of funding for NPR and PBS. So, this could be a very symbolic gesture that riles up the Republican base. Maybe or maybe not. Like you said, it might be like a fading issue, but is it long lasting? I just don't know.
Yeah, it's an important question, because also these are outlets, networks, basically, that are also seeing their business model and the rest of the sort of corporate business model collapse in different ways. So what that looks like going forward is hard to predict. And obviously the Trump administration will also have to codify some of this to make it harder, if they want to, for a new administration to come in and kind of rebuild. They have to keep burning things down officially and not just kind of tweaking around the edges. If, again, that's what they want to do, it is what they say they want to do.